What years were you in the service?
I went in the service 2 weeks after I got out of high school. I graduated from high school in the end of January 1943, and I went into the service 2 weeks later. Went to Fort MacArthur, California for a week, and then we took the train to Nashville, Tennessee, which is a classification center where they give you a battery of tests to see if you should be a bombardier, a navigator, or a pilot. Well, I passed all three, but a pilot and bombardier had to have 20/20 vision, and I had 20/30, so I could only be a navigator. Well, I'm happy that I was a navigator, but that's what determined me being a navigator. And then I got out in October 45.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Well, it's sort of a funny thing. I wanted to enlist. I went to the Air Force. Of course, everyone wanted to be a pilot, as I did. Went to the Air Force, I went to the Marines, went to the Navy. Enlistments were all closed. But the Air Force had a deal. You come in and take the physical, you take the written tests and so forth. And if you passed, then they gave you a letter. So that when you are drafted, you hand that letter to the first base you're on, and they immediately put you in the Air Force as an aviation cadet.
What war were you in?
World War II.
I never heard of it. And you were...
It started in 1939, September 1st, when Hitler invaded Poland. It ended in August 1945.
What was your job as a navigator?
Well, I was up in the nose of the B-17. The bombardier was right in the very nose where the bomb site was, and I was behind him on a desk with a couple of instruments there showing airspeed and altitude. And it was my job to tell the pilot where we were.
What kind of plane did you navigate?
It's a Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress bomber, 4 engines.
What was your rank as navigator?
When I was commissioned in December 24th, 1943, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant. And in May, I was promoted to first lieutenant, May of 44. And in January of 45, I was promoted to captain. And when I was promoted to captain, I was only 20 years old.
On an average mission, how many planes went out and how many came back?
So you see that, you see the list of my missions. It varied quite a bit.
Yeah.
You see this. Shortest was 14 people, 14 planes. The biggest was 42 planes. 46. But during the tough time, when we had a lot of losses, it averaged, show down here somewhere, 22, 23. Oh, here it says 22. From March to May, which is when we really had terrible losses.
Ever wounded?
Yeah, I was wounded in my knee, 3 stitches, flying over, bombing an airfield in France called Chateau d'Un, southwest of Paris.
How were you injured?
Well, there was a big burst of flak when we were on the bomb run, and the pilot, the bombardier, and I were all wounded. But we continued on the bomb run and dropped the bombs. I'm sure I told you this. My first thought when I was wounded was, I'll never be able to dance again. Because I love to dance.
Returned to navigating after your injury?
I mean, I got back to the air base about 3 days before D-Day, and I flew 2 missions on D-Day, still with the stitches in my knee.
Can you describe your role during that D-Day?
Well, I was in the lead plane. In the morning, we bombed the beaches at 7:25 in the morning. It was a complete undercast. We could not see the ground, so we bombed by radar. And we bombed in front of the British landing. The British, the Americans, Canadians, the three different groups that made the landing. In the afternoon, it was clear, and we bombed a road junction about 5 miles in from the ocean, in from the shoreline, where some German troops were assembling.
What was a typical day when there was a mission like?
We'd know the night before we were going to go on a mission, and someone would wake us up at 4, 5 in the morning. We'd go to breakfast, and then we'd go to briefing down on the front flight line, where all the big shots of the air base would be up there, and they'd have a great big map of Europe, and they'd have yarn and push pins, and the yarn would start at our base, and it would show the route where you're going to go down to, going to depart the British Isle at, say, Beachy Head. That was one of the departure points, a little town. And then it would go across and show where you're going to have turn points to the target and the route you're going to have coming back. That was the general briefing. And then we had a navigator's briefing. And then we went and got our costumes on. I wore a heated suit and had a parachute that snaps to a harness. So you didn't wear the parachute, you just carried it with you. And it just lay on the bottom of the airplane handy. If something happened, you're going to need it. And so we'd take off, and I was a lead navigator, so I was pretty much telling the pilot what to do, and our plane everyone else had to follow us. So we had a route around England, several checkpoints, to help gather in other groups. And then finally we'd cross the coastline at the precise minute and head out to the target first cross France or Belgium or Holland, and then on into Germany.
Where was your air base located?
Our air base was called Snetterton Heath. It was located halfway between Cambridge and Norwich. That whole area is referred to as East Anglia. It's the eastern part of England.
What were the living conditions like?
Not bad. We were in barracks, these sort of Quonset kind of huts, and we had beds, cots, and we had a little pot-bellied stove that we put coal in to keep us warm, because when we got there it was pretty cold in March. And I went through the following winter completely, and of course we used a lot of coal. What else?
What did you do in your spare time?
Well, when I was flying mission, once in a while we'd get a pass and go to London for 2 or 3 days. I don't know, we didn't do, read books, didn't do much in between missions. Sometimes we did training, sometimes we'd have training classes, refresher. That's about all I remember.
Did any of your friends die?
Yeah, one plane that we went through training in Texas and then we flew overseas together. They were shot down pretty early, and it was Captain Link, and his crew, and they were good friends. One thing about the air war compared to the people and the infantry, it was less personal. I mean, the infantry, somebody shot right beside you, and the medics come and so on and so forth. But here you're in an airplane, there's 10 of us, it's separate. You didn't, I didn't see anyone die, for example, you would have in the infantry. Our crew was lucky. Almost everybody in the crew was wounded at one time or another, but not severely.
Were you awarded any medals?
An air medal. And when we finished our total tour, which in my case was 33 missions, I was awarded the air medal. And after I was wounded, I was awarded the Purple Heart.
Can you tell us about your mission to Poland in April 1944?
We went to Posen, Poland on April 9th. And we lost 2 aircraft. 2 days later, we were briefed to go to that same target. But we got out over the Baltic Sea, and the German fighters hit us. And it was a disaster. As you see here, we lost 11 planes out of the 27. It was awful. Planes were just going down right and left. And so we didn't get to the target. We just turned around and headed home. And on our way home, we dropped our bombs on a harbor there in Germany called Rostock.
How were you affected by the war?
As a person.
I don't think it affected me like I say. Someone, I had the greatest admiration for the guys on the ground. Ours was sort of a clean war. Here we came home, we had a sheet and a bunk and a blanket. You've seen some of these movies of how awful it was being on the ground in the mud and the foxholes. I was pretty lucky to be in the air, I think, even though we did have terrible losses in the spring of '44.